okay, and then minus thickness to plus thickness. So how this thickness, you know, changes my design. The design, when I say changes my design, I mean you have some, which is your target. Target maybe here stiffness, target maybe some amount of stress that you want, you know, stress to be less than this, okay, you want life to be better than this, okay. So ultimately those are your targets. So what you want to see is how the combination of width, how your width variation, thickness variation changes your you know, your maximum stress. So for that you have design of experiment, okay, that is there for different levels. I mean you have, you know, uh, levels, as in you may have for width you may have two levels, which is minus w plus w. You may also have, you know, minus 1w, minus 2w, minus plus 1w, plus 2w, and then as it is. So let's say here the levels are, you know, 5. So there are DOE, you know, available in Minitab or other softwares, through which what you can do is by giving all these, you know, levels and the variable, you get to know that, okay, now out of let's say 50 or 100 permutations and combinations, if I do some 10 designs, I will get to know the impact of that, this width, thickness, and angle on my stress. Okay, so design of experiments is nothing but basically shortlisting number of trials or number of simulations which you have to do. Okay, so if you have 100 type of permutations and combinations available out of width, thickness, and angle, it is not really feasible to do all those 100, you know, either simulations or basically testing. So what you do is you try to basically, you know, funnel down. You try to take some you know, combinations of width and thickness and angle, which will still show you the effect on stress as was expected by taking out 100 samples. Okay, so that's what is achieved through DOE. And now you do DOE, and after that you do optimization. Okay, now on this slide there's one just a minute, let me erase this. Okay, now what you do is, okay, now your attempt is that uh, I'll come little to process capability. Now let's say you come up with a certain width, you know, that okay, I want this width of 1 mm, sorry, thickness of, let's say, you know, 2 mm, in a tolerance of you know, 0.1, 2.1 to 1.9 I can go. So okay, so now what we do is, we just a minute, what we do is we kind of see that how our manufacturing processes. So now this CP and CPK, this is more related to, you know, process capability. And what you see on right hand side, you can also relate it with design robustness rather. Okay, so now let's say this is your intended, okay, this is your 2 2 mm thickness for the pump wall. Okay, now you say that, okay, if I am varying between this and this as minimum, I think okay, because this is my upper spec limit, which is you know, which is 2.1. Okay, and this is my lower spec limit, which is 1.9. So as far as you know, I my fuel tank's thickness varies between 1.9 and 2.1. I am okay because it will still meet my all requirements. It will still meet design requirement, functional requirement, everything. So here what you say is, okay, now my kind of design is you know, uh, uh, okay, because from process it is such that, you know, the thickness is always maintained between these two levels. Now how you say from process perspective. So now here what they do is, maybe I'll not again go in very deep, but what you see here is, this is typical normal distribution, you know, how this thickness varies basically. Okay, uh, for all the parts. Okay, so let's say these are your number of parts. Okay, so for most of the components the thickness is 2, but here there are components, you know, for which this is your upper spec limit. Okay, and this is your lower spec limit. So there are components for which the thickness is more than upper spec limit. Is this accepted? No, it is not accepted. Here there are components for which its thickness is less than 1.9 mm. Are they accepted? No. So is this process really good? No, because you know, CPK is less than 1 or no, I'll just write, you know, what CPK is, and then you'll understand. Okay, so from this picture you can really get to know that your process is such that, you know, few components always lie above upper spec limit, and few components, I mean the dimension of few components always lie, thickness of for few tanks always lie, you know, below 1.9. So no, I cannot go ahead with this process. I'll cancel this because it does not ensure me, you know, full quality. Okay, now the way this is measured is using CP, basically, you know, process capability. So CP, the way we define CP is, you know, basically it's a delta. Delta is in the delta of spec limit, which is upper spec limit minus lower spec limit, and divided by your 6 sigma. Okay, now sigma is your standard deviation. Now standard deviation is something which comes from your process. Okay, so you have this mean here. Okay, and then obviously each and every fuel tank's thickness will not be 2 mm. There will be some variance in all, I mean basically over the products which you manufacture. Okay, so out of those, all those variances, what you get this, what you get that, okay, for that process of tank manufacturing, tank injection molding, I have standard deviation of so and so. Okay, so 6 times of that standard deviation is, so if you have delta divided by, you do 6 times of that standard deviation, then CPK is 1. Okay, and if your CPK is less than 1, what it means is your 6 times of sigma, okay, is more than this. Okay, because your process sigma is high, and 6 times of process sigma is somewhere here. Okay, so if you divide your delta of upper spec limit and lower spec limit by 6 sigma, the number is going to be less than 1. Okay, so we say that less than 1 CPK is not really good and is the process to be rejected. What you try to do is CP equal to 1 okay? You may say it is okay because, you know, our 6 sigma, our extreme thickness is still within the upper spec limit and lower spec limit. But as this is, as you know, these are statistical quantities. Let's say if your thickness is such that you fall on upper spec limit, so your thickness is 2.1. Are you going to accept it? No, because it's a statistical, and there comes the confidence, you know, confidence level. Okay, how confident you are that your thickness is going to be exactly 2.1, and what if it exceeds 2.1? No, can you really take that risk? No. So what is always good? Always it is good that your extreme here, let's say in case of C, your extreme is very well inside your upper spec limit on right hand side and very well inside your lower spec limit on left hand side. Okay, so in this case, what is going to happen? In this case, your 6 sigma is small and your delta of upper spec limit and lower spec limit is high. Okay, so the ratio of this is going to be above 1. Okay, now if you take, if you take a process which is 6 sigma process, okay, plus minus 6 sigma. Okay, so in that case, what will be the spec difference? It will be 12 sigma. Okay, and your process is such that, you know, it can accommodate, I mean its variation is 6 sigma. So what you get is basically everything cancels, so CP equal to 2. CP equal to 2. Okay, that's for 6 sigma. So that's how you measure your process capability. Okay, there is one more which is CPK. So there it is, I mean here it is only delta of upper spec limit and lower spec limit. In CPK you also look for how much is the shift with respect to the mean. Okay, we may not for now go into that detail. Okay, now let's come to you know, this how simulation really helps. Okay, so now what has been found is, you know, the cost varies exponentially as you go, you know, ahead in your product design. So if it is still concept, if it is still concept, design review, production design, I mean prototype, everything, it is still okay, you know, to make some changes and control your cost. But the moment you go you know, you proceed further, if you ask for any changes at this, the cost is going to be very high. So, you know, simulation helps you really in this. Okay, as you see here, opportunity to reduce cost. Okay, very high opportunity to reduce cost here. But as you go further, okay, the opportunity to reduce cost is very less. Now, why simulation? I mean, what simulation does is, simulation basically, identifies issue in early design process. And when you start involving simulations, you start involving simulations in your conceptual phase, okay, before even your prototype is built. Okay, right from that, in fact, I would say that you start involving, simulation for requests for quote also. I mean, when you have to approach customers, okay, when you have to give them quote, you also should have a fair understanding, that how much how much code, cost code I should give. And for that, and then some basic requirements, functional requirements. So for all that, you leverage simulation. Okay, and you try to help to get that RFQ. Okay, and then for concept. Okay, and then the reducing the need and thus cost of multiple prototypes. I mean, you may not really want to test, multiple prototypes. Rather, what you would do is, out of 10 brackets, you would just pick, 2 brackets and you would test it, or 3 brackets and you would test it. Okay, and then flexibility to try multiple iterations and concepts. Yes, now, because you don't have to really build prototype and test it, you have luxury. I mean, I'm not saying that software comes free of simulation comes free of cost, but definitely once it is established, it is cheaper than your testing. So you have luxury to try multiple iterations. Optimize the product design. Yes, this is fantastic advantage of simulation. You can optimize, you can fine tune. There are multiple optimization techniques available, whether it's a topology or statistical, or and then you have, okay, you can tell customer about reliability, warranty, product failures. Okay, you can say that, okay, we give 10 years of warranty because you have already validated that my product is not going to fail before 10 years. Okay, that's also done, you know through simulation, and for warranty liability checks. Now one statistics, which I got from Aberdeen Group. Okay, so what it says is, uh, those companies which are using simulation, to the best of its level, are able to decrease physical prototypes by 44%. Even in worst case also, those who are not really using it to the best are able to reduce the prototypes by 32%, which is really a huge saving. Okay, and as you see, number of iterations increase, it's 56%. Okay, so both of our advantages are, validated by this statistics also here. So what do you call a simulation driven design? Okay, so basically simulation driven design is, you use simulation in every stage. You have concept, you verify it, you simulate it. Okay, you have concept is, shortlisted. You're going to design, you before prototype, you check it, how it is performing, which concept will work well, for different requirements. Then you do optimization. Okay, you have design, you have to optimize it. You want to use, such that your cost is low, your quality is high, you are meeting all the requirements, you optimize it, and then you improve it. Okay, let's say it is used, you see some failure, some wear, some fretic failure, some creep failure. Okay, so that also, you evaluate that failure, you try to get to the root cause of failure. If it is from design perspective, you use leverage simulation a lot to get to the root cause of failure, and then you work on that. Okay, so maybe, yeah, I just repeat. So you have, for code, you use your project initiation, coding, RFQ, you use your simulations. Then you use your simulations a lot for concept. Then pre-prototype. Then you have prototype design validation. Okay, and then you have product validation, production. So simulation is used very well in all the stages of product development. Okay, now computer aided engineering or simulations, what exactly is this? I would say this is basically a mathematical way of, replicating your real problem. Okay, into mathematical models. So you use physics, you use mathematics, to solve those equations. Okay, the simulations can be 1D, the way it is done by, GT Power or MATLAB Simulink. Okay, uh, and it can be 2D 3D. It can be, you know, structural, where comes the stress, you know, dynamics, and a lot of vibrations, fatigue, everything. It can be thermal and fluid, you know. Here what you want to check is how the flow is, you know. Let's say how the fuel is flowing from tank to the rail, how the walls are performing. Then you may want to do how the kinematics is. I mean, let's say if you take a crane, and when you try to lift something, how that lever is, you know, working. I mean, how that angle varies, or how the motion. 4 bar mechanism is something which you all might have heard. Okay, so that's something which is kinematics. I mean, how you see that with rotation of one link, you know, how the fourth link is getting rotated. Okay, now manufacturing processes simulation is also leverage, you know, for cutting, for milling, and all those operations, to check that for forming operations. Even mold flow, which is used to, you know, check the injection molding, how the weld lines are, you know, how the temperature distribution is, how rapidly you should cool it, and so on. Okay, and then you have electrical electromagnetic analysis. Yes, definitely, in all the actuators, you know, pumps, and all the electrical device, electromechanical devices, I would say, rather. You know, you have electrical or electromechanical analysis. You get to know the electric flux, you get to know the electromagnetic force, and so on. You have pure electrical analysis also, like EMI, EMCs. Okay, where the signal integrity and interferences are evaluated. Okay, so the key elements, you know. Okay, the moment you go and try to simulate, what you're trying to do, you're trying to replicate your physical model with the mathematical model. Okay, so few things which you have to be very much sure is, you know, how you build your mathematical model. Are you really trying to you should take ditto the same model, the same dimensions, the same geometry, the same distribution of material, everything. You should have the same material. You should also have the same environmental conditions, or, you know, the mating conditions, like boundary conditions. It is mounted on chassis through bracket. Okay, it is bolted, it is welded. So all these conditions you have to take in mathematical model as it is. Okay, you have to really be very cautious about material data. Okay, now let's say if it is low load, it may not really enter into plastic zone. So that there you may choose a different material model. If you see that, you know, it is entering into plastic mode because it is heavily loaded, you may choose some different material model, which is elastic plastic model. Okay, if it is rubber, the material model may be different, because there are multiple material models available to, you know, mathematically model given materials, because materials show different characteristics, you know. I mean, some materials, steel, the load versus deflection may be linear. For rubber, it will not be linear. Okay, and then yes, validation of simulation is also very important. I'm not saying that every simulation has to be validated with test, but yes, when you develop a new methodology, you have to have test results, you know, to tune your simulation. Why you need to tune it? Because you assume something from your real life problem, but you do not know, you know, how let's say if it is fixed constraint, you know. Now fixed constraint may not be really as fixed as rigidly fixed. It may be little flexible. Okay, for temperature you may assume that, okay, the profile was, you know, the profile was sinusoidal, but in reality the profile was not sinusoidal, it was just a spike. Okay, so for all these variations, you definitely, what you do is you do simulation, and then you try to validate simulation, you know, by matching your test results with simulation. In this, you kind of tune your simulations. There are multiple features available in your softwares, you know, which you try to tune definitely rational, with a strong rational, you know. It should not be that you just tune your simulation to match your test result. It should be with strong rational. Okay, and yes, the top three factors which influence results. Yes, the moment you have a wrong mathematical model, you have, you know, instead of you know that I just told that, instead of, you know, flexible fixation, you have rigid fixation. Okay, if it is in contact, you may not define that contact. Okay, and then you may choose some material model which is not really going well with your material. Okay, inconsistent unit, I would say that experienced people won't do it, but this is something which is very much there for, you know, new users. Okay, so this is also something which you have to, I mean, this is definitely one of the cause for wrong results, you know. And a few simulations I'll just walk through the way they look. So this is GT power. This is 1D simulation. 1D as in here, I mean GT has some features to include 3D also, but mostly GT power is used for 1D. So 1D as in, what you try to do is you try to, let's take an example of spring. So okay, you apply a force on spring and it displaces. Okay, so are you really taking care of how the material is distributed along the spring cross section? Not really. Okay, so what you're trying to do, you're just trying to trying to model it as a kind of rigid bar on which you apply a force and it deflects. Okay, okay, so that's kind of 1D modeling. And 1D modeling is even MATLAB Simulink has 1D modelings. Okay, and 1D modeling is really very useful for, number one, it is useful for during concept selection phase. It is also very useful when you have to develop a system. Okay, a system may have multiple components, and 1D gives a very good overview of how these 1D components, when connected together, how they perform in system. Okay, it may be very difficult to model the system using 3D FE model, in ANSYS or Abacus. So 1D simulations are more popular. Okay, then you have definitely 3D or 2D simulations, which you all might have had a look. So this is typically, this is a turbine blade. This is one stage of turbine blade, where maybe that, the centrifugal load, they might have simulated. Now this is electric field simulation. So you have, core and a coil, and you see that how when the coil is excited, how the electric flux or electric flux density, varies. Then you have this PCB here. You want to see that, okay, here you have some ICs like, IGBT or something. Some ICs are mounted which dissipate high power. So how the temperature over PCB varies. Okay, and then you have here flow simulation. So what you do is, okay, the fluid is passing, the fluid is coming from here, and because of this rotatory part, how the fluid distribution is, downstream. Okay, Nageshwari.
Yes, Prashant.
Yeah, I was just wondering, as it is 11:55, and I have this typical mechanical failures, which include, some topic like fatigue and random vibration. So do we have time for this?
Yes, you don't have any time constraint. You can actually teach the complete session.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So it will really give an overview, how about the fatigue and the vibration, how typically we go ahead, in simulation. Okay, okay, so what I have listed here is typical mechanical failures. These are very typical mechanical failures, right? So there may be n number of, I would not say n number of failures, but there are many failures other than this also, like creep, okay, wear. Okay, so fatigue itself, there can be different type of fatigue, thermomechanical fatigue and so on. So, but typically, you might have heard a lot about buckling. Now, buckling is something where you apply a force here. The member is super thin, and because the member is thin, it gets buckled and gets failure at somewhere here. Now, fatigue failure is no doubt one of the major. It covers a big chunk of typical failures, which are observed in field. Okay, and fatigue failure may come out of vibration. Yes, at the same time, in vibration you may have, basically a different type of vibration, which are sinusoidal, which are random. Let's say a very simple vibration case is that your stress is something. Okay, your stress is 100, but your structure is vibrating at its resonance frequency. So let's say resonance frequency is 50 hertz, and you get from engine 50 hertz. Okay, the member which is mounted near engine has a natural frequency of 50 hertz, and engine is also vibrating with 50 hertz. So what happens? A resonance for your member, it resonates with your engine frequency. So at that resonance, your stress which was in member, which was 100 megapascal, will suddenly go high to 1000 megapascal. Also, if there is less damping. Okay, if there is damping, then it may go to 500 megapascal. But 100 megapascal was okay for you to sustain, but the moment it reaches 500 megapascal, no, it will really cross your limit. Okay, so those are typically vibration failures. And random vibration, sinusoidal vibration also lead to your fatigue failure. We are going to cover it in the coming slides. Okay, Material is very simple. I mean, let's say static failures. You know, the moment you exceed your yield strength, the material gets yielded. You may not want yielding. The moment you exceed your failure strain, you know, the member gets observes a crack or permanent fracture. Okay. So I have taken out, you know, fatigue and a very a brief overview of random vibration. So how typically you handle, you know, these two types of failures. So yes, you know, your knowledge, your whatever you have studied in your graduation, you know, or post graduation, will be used. I mean, that is the basic theory, you know, which goes very well with all the algorithms which are used in different fatigue softwares. Okay, life estimation softwares. So just let me give a very, you know, a brief overview of fatigue here, maybe just few slides. So very basic thing is, you know, fatigue life, the main two numbers which affect your fatigue life is your stress amplitude and your mean stress. Okay, so when I say stress amplitude, now this you may understand what is stress range. So typically fatigue failure is the failure which is observed when the loads are pulsating. The load can be load, pressure load, temperature load, many loads. Okay, so whenever you have pulsating loads, let's say your hairpin, when you try to bend it from, you know, minus 10 newton to plus 10 newton, okay, or 0 newton to 10 newton. Okay, so basically whenever you have any pulsating and you keep loading it, you know, 0 to 10, 10 to 0, minus 10 to 10, 10 to minus 1, and so on, you keep loading it, then you may observe that it may fail much earlier than it would fail when you apply just one load of 10 newton, just one cycle, or just monotonic load. Okay, so and this type of situation is very much common in your field. Let's say now if you take a example of tank, the fuel tank itself. Now in the truck which is not moving on the road, okay, also observe some vibration coming out of what? Coming out of engine. Okay, so those components which are mounted near engine, they undergo, you know, vibrations. And when we say vibrations, what they undergo, maybe displacement of plus 10 mm and minus 10 mm. So when they see a deflection of plus 10 mm and minus 10 mm, this is nothing but you see a deflection, but deflection ultimately is what? You see a change in the load. So load is getting varied from let's say minus x to plus x. Okay, so the moment load is getting varied and engine is running, if the truck, you know, you have cranked the truck, the truck is on, the engine is running, whether the truck moves on road or not. Okay, so you start seeing this vibration. And when the truck moves, this is not the only vibration. You get vibrations from road. Okay, vibrations from basically engine vibrations and road vibrations. Okay,